Hey guys, tonight we're heading to the ancient sands of Egypt, where cats weren't just pets, they were revered, mystical creatures. Imagine a world where your feline friend could be a divine protector, a symbol of power and a guardian against evil spirits. Now you probably won't survive this adventure, and we don't mean it literally, but well, with the ancient Egyptian reverence for cats, you'd better be on your best behavior around them. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, feel free to let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step into the scorching heat of ancient Egypt, where the sun reflects off the golden sands like an endless sheet of fire. But instead of the usual image of pharaohs and pyramids, something even more intriguing awaits you. You see cats. Those sleek, graceful creatures are more than just common animals here. They are almost divine, exalted by the people, and treated with reverence unmatched by any other creature. In fact, you're about to learn how cats, yes, those same cats we adore today, were once considered living embodiments of the gods themselves. In ancient Egyptian society, cats were far more than just pets. They were symbols of protection, grace, and supernatural power. Ancient Egyptians believed that cats carried the essence of the goddess Bastet, the fierce lioness goddess of home, fertility, and importantly, protection. Bastet wasn't just a quiet deity sitting on a pedestal. No, she was a fierce and protective figure, much like the cats themselves. Historians still argue whether Bastet's association with protection began with her being linked to the protective nature of felines, or if the cats were seen as living manifestations of her powers. You can almost imagine yourself in a typical Egyptian household, watching as a cat prowls around, its eyes glowing in the dim light. It's not just a pet, it's a creature that connects the mortal realm to the divine. You'd hear the quiet murmur of prayers to Bastet as families placed offerings of milk and fish in front of their beloved feline companions. But don't get too comfortable. You wouldn't last a second here without understanding the power these cats held in society. Now that you're getting the vibe of how important these cats were, let's talk about Bastet. You can almost feel the warm breeze of the Egyptian desert as you move deeper into the mystery of this lioness goddess. Imagine walking into an ancient temple, its massive stone walls covered in intricate hieroglyphs, each symbol telling stories of the gods. At the center of it all stands Bastet, depicted with the head of a lioness or a domestic cat, fiercely protecting the land and its people. Bastet wasn't just some goddess on a pedestal. She was an active force in the daily lives of Egyptians. She wasn't just about protecting homes from snakes or vermin. Though that was a big deal, Bastet was also seen as the goddess of love, fertility, and child. She was, in essence, a motherly figure who provided both comfort and strength. Historians still debate whether the Egyptians initially saw cats as symbols of Bastet because of their nurturing nature, or if they truly believed cats were a divine gift from the goddess herself. Picture it. You're walking into the heart of an ancient Egyptian home, the soft hum of a cat's purr filling the air. It's not just a cat you're hearing, it's the voice of Bastet herself, offering you protection and warmth. And in a society where superstition and divine favor were everything, that purring could be the difference between life and death. But not all was tranquil in Egypt's feline kingdom. While cats were worshipped, the consequences of harming one were severe, almost unthinkable. In fact, the punishment for killing a cat was so harsh that some sources suggest it was met with death, a sign of just how seriously Egyptians took their feline companions. It wasn't just about superstition, it was about maintaining the cosmic balance and respecting the divine link that these cats represented. This is where things get a little, well, catty. Cats were worshipped, not just in homes, but also in the temples, often depicted as guardians of the sacred. Imagine stepping into a grand temple dedicated to Bastet, the air thick with incense, and the only sound is the soft footfalls of the cats prowling around the stone floors. Their role was crucial, not only as symbols of protection, but also as physical protectors of the temple's sacred relics. Now we know you're probably thinking, what's the big deal? They're just cats, right? Well, you'd be mistaken. These cats were so important that priests would often keep them in the temples as living embodiments of Bastet's spirit, acting as the physical manifestation of divine protection. If a temple cat walked by you, it wasn't just an animal, It was a direct connection to the goddess herself. Historians still argue whether these cats had any divine powers, or if their presence was simply a potent reminder of the divine order. But the Egyptians, they weren't taking any chances. Now let's step away from the grand temples and see how cats fit into the more practical, everyday side of Egyptian life. You're standing in a bustling Egyptian marketplace, the scent of spices and fresh fruit filling the air. People are haggling over goods, while children play by the stalls. But something catches your eye. A cat, sleek and agile, darting across the dusty ground, hunting a mouse or perhaps a snake, with grace and precision. It's not just a pet, it's a worker, a protector. In ancient Egypt, cats were vital in more ways than just offering divine protection. They were the unofficial guardians of the food supply. One of the most overlooked roles of cats in ancient Egypt was their part in protecting food stores. Think about it. Grain was a precious commodity. It was the foundation of the Egyptian diet and economy, and grain had its enemies, mice, rats and other pests that could destroy entire harvests. Without modern pesticides or traps, the Egyptians turned to their furry feline companions for help. Cats were excellent hunters, skilled in eliminating pests that threatened food storage. So when you saw a cat lounging lazily in front of a grain silo, it wasn't just enjoying the sun, it was on duty, guarding the food that fed a nation. Cats in ancient Egypt weren't just adored for their divine symbolism, they were also integral to survival. In fact, some people believe that the Egyptian successful civilization might have relied on these natural pest controllers more than we realize. But don't get too comfortable. Cats weren't the only creatures with a hand in Egypt's well-being. The Egyptians also employed a variety of other animals for practical purposes. Camels, donkeys, and even crocodiles had their place in Egyptian society. But none could rival the cat when it came to protecting food stores and homes from the smallest and perhaps most irritating of threats. Historians still argue whether cats were seen as more than just tools of protection, or if they truly had a revered status in the homes of the common people. After all, these creatures didn't just roam free. They were fed, cared for, and kept close, ensuring their loyalty. Can you imagine walking into a home, and there, nestled in the corner, is a cat, its eyes gleaming in the low light, a silent sentry in the corner of the room? It wasn't just a pet, it was a key part of the household's survival strategy. And the more you learn about how cats worked alongside humans in ancient Egypt, the more you understand just how much they were valued, not just for their beauty or divine status, but for their quiet, invaluable service. As you walk through the bustling streets of ancient Egypt, with the marketplace echoing the sounds of commerce and the air thick with scents of fresh bread and spices, the cats are ever present. Their graceful movements, their seemingly detached attitudes, are more than just a quirk of nature. They're a sign of how entwined these creatures were in Egyptian life. But beyond just pest control and divine protection, cats also had a role to play in the very heart of Egyptian society homes. Imagine stepping into an Egyptian family's modest home. The walls are adorned with vibrant murals depicting daily life, gods and animals. The floor, covered with soft reed mats, is home to an assortment of creatures. But it's the cat that commands attention, not just any pet. The cat was a beloved companion, often found lounging in the sun, its eyes half closed in peaceful serenity. But this wasn't merely an animal to be admired. It had a purpose beyond companionship. Cats were often kept for their spiritual significance, placed in homes not just as cute little furballs, but as protectors of the family. In fact, it's believed that Egyptians would often bless their cats with offerings and prayers, asking Bastet to watch over them, ensuring good health, fertility, and protection. But there's more to this relationship than mere symbolism. It's not hard to imagine that, within this sacred bond, Egyptians may have even believed that their very lives and the well-being of their children depended on these creatures. They weren't just seen as pets, they were interwoven into the spiritual fabric of the household. Cats' natural ability to remain calm and stoic, no matter the chaos around them, reflected the tranquility and balance the Egyptians sought in their homes. Historians still debate whether cats were truly considered sacred in every Egyptian household, or if their veneration was more limited to the wealthier classes. What's clear, however, is that cats were an essential part of everyday life, their presence in homes acting as a reminder of divine order and protection. Can you imagine, as a member of the family, feeling the weight of that protection every day as the cat, lounging lazily by the fire, seems to watch over you, its eyes never quite closing completely. It wasn't just about having a cute companion. Cats were woven into the very fabric of Egyptian society, serving both practical and spiritual roles, and in this way, they stood apart from other animals kept in Egyptian homes, who may have been valued for their work or utility. Cats, it seemed, were more than just animals. They were partners in the delicate balance between human life and the divine. As the sun sets over the Nile, casting long shadows across the Egyptian landscape, you find yourself deep within the confines of the royal palace, surrounded by opulence and grandeur. The cool stone walls and intricate carvings tell the tales of pharaohs who once ruled with unimaginable power. Yet, amid this wealth and authority, something subtle catches your eye. Cats. Yes, even in the presence of the most powerful rulers in the world, the humble cat was not only welcomed but revered. The question arises, why were these regal creatures so deeply intertwined with the pharaohs? Pharaohs, with their untold riches and armies, didn't just rule through force. They also relied on divine favor. It's no surprise, then, that the pharaohs were closely linked to Bastet, the lioness goddess of protection, love, and fertility. Cats, as manifestations of Bastet's divine presence, became symbols of royal power, bringing an aura of protection and authority to the rulers. The connection between the pharaohs and cats was not merely symbolic. It was a bond deeply rooted in the belief that these creatures embodied divine qualities that helped maintain the prosperity and stability of Egypt. Thus, the revered cats of Egypt were more than just companions. They were integral to the pharaoh's reign, embodying both divine protection and the regal power of the rulers themselves. The presence of a cat in the royal palace wasn't just an indulgence. It was a deliberate display of spiritual power, a way to connect the pharaohs to the divine in a way that reinforced their dominance. Imagine walking through the corridors of the palace, hearing the soft padding of paws on cool stone floors as you pass by the private chambers of the pharaoh. It's not a simple pet. This is an animal that represents much more than a mere companion. Cats were seen as the earthly embodiments of Bastet herself, and their presence in the royal court was a powerful symbol. Some pharaohs even kept a number of cats as pets, treating them with the utmost reverence. These cats, it was believed, brought the pharaoh's connection to Bastet's power closer. They were considered divine protectors of the royal family, safeguarding them from any malice that might befall them. Historians still argue whether the pharaohs truly believed the cats had protective powers, or if the cats were simply a visible and symbolic display of divine favor. Regardless, one thing is certain: these royal cats were treated with the highest respect. They were well cared for, often adorned with jewelry, and allowed to roam freely through the royal palaces. It was not uncommon for cats to be given their own servants, whose sole job was to tend to the needs of the royal felines. In fact, some royal cats were even mummified and buried with their owners, ensuring their place in the afterlife. But the relationship between pharaohs and their feline companions wasn't purely ceremonial. Cats also had a more practical role in the royal courts, acting as natural hunters of vermin that could threaten food supplies and undermine the palace's pristine image. It's likely that the pharaoh's palace had more than its fair share of food stores, and having a handful of cats to keep the place free of pests was no small detail. In this way, cats were the silent protectors of both the royal household and the delicate balance of Egyptian power. Imagine standing there in the royal palace, watching a cat approach the pharaoh's throne, its soft purring filling the air with a sense of calm and protection. As the pharaoh gazes down at the animal, they are reminded of their divine right to rule, the unseen protection bestowed by Bastet herself. The grandeur of Egypt's royal court may have been filled with opulent treasures and towering statues of the gods, but there was one unspoken yet undeniable truth: cats held sway in both the sacred and the everyday. As you make your way down the long corridors of the palace, past murals depicting glorious battles and divine mythologies, you begin to understand just how deeply entwined cats were in Egyptian culture. They weren't simply pets or symbols. They were immortalized in art, captured in the rhythms of religious rituals, and inscribed in the very fabric of the culture itself. Let's take a moment to appreciate the way cats were depicted in Egyptian art. You walk through the royal chambers, where murals and statues adorn the walls, and you see the graceful, poised figures of cats everywhere. Cats were frequently shown sitting upright, alert and poised, their sleek bodies arching in gentle movements. The art didn't just portray their appearance, it immortalized their significance. Cats were painted in a way that depicted both their divine grace and their fierce independence. As a result, these images weren't simply decorations, they were sacred representations of the divine, echoing the power of Bastet, the goddess who is often shown with the head of a lioness or a cat. It's as if every brushstroke or carved detail was meant to reinforce the idea that the divine and the mundane were intertwined, with cats serving as the living link between the two. But it wasn't just in royal homes or temples where cats graced the walls. Cats were often depicted in tombs, accompanying their owners to the afterlife. Imagine yourself standing in an ancient tomb, the air cool and silent as you gaze upon a mural that shows a cat sitting by the feet of a dead pharaoh. This cat wasn't simply a piece of artwork, it was a protector, ensuring that the pharaoh would not be alone in the afterlife. The inclusion of a cat in the tomb symbolized the belief that the animal would continue to serve as a guardian, watching over the soul of the departed. In fact, historians still debate whether these depictions of cats in tombs were meant to represent the cat's role in the afterlife, or if they were intended to serve as a form of spiritual insurance for the deceased. Cats also appeared in Egyptian religious rituals, further solidifying their connection to the divine. Imagine standing in a bustling Egyptian temple, where priests and priestesses chant sacred hymns and burn incense in honor of the gods. Cats, as living embodiments of Bastet, were often brought into the temple during these ceremonies, walking gracefully through the crowds. Their presence was considered a direct link to the goddess herself, and their purring was thought to bring blessings and good fortune. The sight of a cat moving through the temple wasn't just about admiration, it was about invoking divine favor and ensuring that the gods, particularly Bastet, watched over the proceedings. Historians are still divided over the true extent of the reverence that the Egyptians had for cats. Some believe that the cats were purely symbolic, creatures who served as representations of the divine, while others argue that the cats were viewed as sacred, living embodiments of Bastet's protective power. Regardless of where you fall on the spectrum, it's clear that cats were a pervasive force in ancient Egypt. They were more than just pets. They were divine intermediaries, symbols of protection, and guardians of both the physical and spiritual worlds. As you stand in the cool, sacred silence of the temple, a cat brushes past your leg, its fur warm and soft. You can almost feel the weight of the divine in the air as you understand the deep, spiritual bond between these animals and the ancient Egyptians. They were more than just companions. They were guardians, protectors, and even messengers of the gods. Now as the sun begins to dip behind the mighty pyramids of Giza, casting long golden shadows over the desert, you find yourself drawn into one of the most fascinating aspects of ancient Egyptian culture, the mysterious supernatural beliefs surrounding cats. If you thought these revered creatures were simply pets or symbols of protection, think again. Cats weren't just part of Egyptian life. They were believed to possess mystical powers, the kind that could influence the very forces of life and death. As you stroll through the streets of ancient Egypt, the buzz of the marketplace slowly fades away, replaced by an eerie silence. There, in the stillness, you feel the weight of the supernatural as it hangs in the air, thick with mystery. The Egyptians believed that cats were not just guardians of homes or the physical world, but also protectors of the spiritual realm. It was said that cats could see things that humans couldn't: spirits, unseen forces, and even glimpses of the afterlife. These abilities were thought to be a gift from Bastet herself, and it wasn't just a superstition. It was an integral part of how Egyptians viewed the boundaries between the mortal world and the divine. You can almost hear the faint hum of incantations as you imagine the Egyptians bringing their cats into sacred spaces, invoking their powers to ward off evil spirits. These cats weren't merely pets, they were supernatural guardians. In fact, the Egyptians believed that the purring of a cat could ward off evil spirits, creating a protective aura around the home. Picture yourself in a darkened room, where the flickering light of an oil lamp casts shadows on the walls. A cat is curled up in the corner, its purring soft and rhythmic. In that moment, the air feels different. It's as if the cat is not just a cat, but a conduit for something far greater, a spiritual connection that stretches far beyond the here and now. But this belief in cats as spiritual protectors wasn't limited to just those who could afford to have cats in their homes. Cats played a role in Egyptian funerary practices as well. often being included in the burials of the dead to act as guides and protectors in the afterlife. Imagine standing in an ancient tomb where a cat lies at the foot of the deceased, its body mummified alongside the pharaoh or noble. This wasn't just a symbolic gesture, it was a vital part of the journey to the afterlife. The cat's presence was believed to guide the soul of the departed through the dangerous realms of the underworld, ensuring safe passage and protection from malevolent forces. Historians still argue whether these beliefs were a reflection of the Egyptians' deep connection to the natural world and their reverence for animals, or if the mysticism surrounding cats was a way to explain the mysteries of life and death. Some suggest that cats' ability to remain calm in the most chaotic of situations was seen as a reflection of divine serenity. Others believe that the Egyptians viewed the cat's mysterious and solitary nature as a perfect metaphor for the unknown, for the unseen realms that lie beyond mortal comprehension. The supernatural connection between cats and the divine was so powerful that it extended beyond the physical world. Cats were believed to be able to traverse the borders between life and death, making them powerful intermediaries between the living and the dead. As you walk through the streets, past homes filled with the scent of incense and the soft purring of cats, you realize that these creatures were much more than they seemed. They were not only protectors of the home, but also spiritual guardians, linking the material world with the divine. As you continue your walk through the streets of ancient Egypt with the dust of the desert swirling in the air, you begin to realize that not all aspects of the cat's revered role were as peaceful as they might seem. While the Egyptians viewed cats as divine protectors, guardians of both the physical and spiritual worlds, there was a dark side to this feline veneration, particularly when it came to their protection. Yes, cats were cherished and revered, but what happened when a cat's life was taken? What were the consequences of such an act? And how did the Egyptians ensure that their beloved companions were treated with the utmost respect? Imagine yourself in the midst of a bustling Egyptian town, where the markets are filled with chatter and the air is heavy with the scent of spices and fresh food. Suddenly, a commotion erupts. Someone has killed a cat. The murmurs of the crowd turn into shouts, and the weight of the situation becomes palpable. The Egyptians took their cats seriously, and so the penalty for harming one was severe. So severe that it became a subject of legend. In fact, it was believed that the punishment for killing a cat could be death. Yes, death. This wasn't just a light-hearted consequence. It was a matter of divine retribution, a cosmic imbalance that needed to be corrected. Now picture the scene as you walk through the town square, where an enraged crowd has gathered around a person who, through some tragic mistake, has killed a cat. The air feels heavy with tension, and you can almost sense the anger of the gods themselves. The Egyptians didn't just see a cat as an animal. It was a direct link to Bastet, the goddess of protection, love, and fertility. To kill a cat was not only to harm a beloved pet, it was seen as an offense to the goddess herself. This wasn't just about an animal, it was about the divine order, the very balance of life and death, and so the punishment was as severe as the offense itself. Historians still debate whether this harsh penalty was actually enforced on a widespread scale, or if it was more of a cultural myth designed to deter anyone from harming these sacred creatures. Some suggest that the harsh penalty may have been reserved for the nobility, for those who were deemed to have committed sacrilege in the eyes of the gods. Others believe that it was a symbol of just how deeply embedded the reverence for cats was within Egyptian society. Regardless of the specifics, it's clear that the Egyptians took their love and respect for cats to an extreme degree, ensuring that anyone who dared harm one would face divine wrath. But it wasn't just about the punishment for killing a cat. The Egyptians also had rituals and ceremonies designed to protect their cats, to ensure they were treated with the respect and care they deserved. Cats were often kept in temples, where they were seen as protectors of sacred spaces. Imagine walking into one of these temples, where the air is thick with incense, and the sound of chanting fills the room. There, amid the offerings and sacred relics, cats lounge lazily in the sunlight, their watchful eyes scanning the surroundings. These cats weren't just pets, they were spiritual guardians, charged with the responsibility of keeping evil at bay. In a society that revered both the physical and spiritual worlds, the role of the cat was a delicate balance. Cats were not just protectors of grain and homes, they were also protectors of the divine order. To harm a cat was to disrupt that balance, and the consequences were severe. This harsh reality paints a picture of just how far the Egyptians were willing to go to maintain the reverence they held for their feline companions. These creatures weren't just pets, They were sacred beings, and their lives were to be protected at all costs. As you continue to wander the dusty streets of ancient Egypt, surrounded by the vibrancy of life, your mind drifts toward the more sacred, mysterious role of cats in the temples of Egypt. We've talked about how cats were revered in homes and by pharaohs, but what about their position in the temples? These revered creatures weren't just symbols or protectors of the home. They were also crucial figures in sacred spaces. Step into an ancient Egyptian temple, and the atmosphere is immediately different. The air is thick with incense, the flickering light of oil lamps casts dancing shadows, and the sound of soft chanting fills your ears. But there's something else. Something that immediately catches your attention: the presence of the cats. These sacred creatures weren't just wandering around aimlessly. They had a purpose in the temple. They were protectors. You see, the temples of ancient Egypt weren't just places of worship, they were also repositories of knowledge, wealth, and sacred relics. They were the homes of the gods. As such, these sacred spaces needed protection. Protection not just from thieves or invaders, but from the forces of chaos and evil. And so cats were brought in to serve as divine guardians. Imagine yourself walking through the corridors of a temple, the marble floor cold beneath your feet, and the scent of frankincense hanging in the air. You see them, cats, gracefully moving about the space, their eyes always alert, their bodies sleek and silent. They weren't just pets, they were seen as living embodiments of Bastet's protective power. The Egyptians believed that these cats had the ability to keep away evil spirits, ensuring that the sacred rituals performed within the temple were undisturbed, and that the divine energies were properly channeled. Cats, with their calm demeanor and their ability to blend into their surroundings, were seen as the perfect guardians for these divine spaces. Historians still debate whether cats were truly revered as protectors in the temple, or if their role was more symbolic. Some argue that the presence of the cats was more about reinforcing the connection between the divine and the mortal world, showing that the gods were watching over the temple, manifested in the form of these regal creatures. Others believe that the cats were actively used as protectors, keeping the temple free from vermin, ensuring the safety of the sacred texts and relics stored inside. Either way, the presence of the cats in the temples was no small matter. These were not just animals, they were seen as direct extensions of divine power. Now picture yourself in the heart of a grand temple, watching as the high priests perform sacred rituals to honor Bastet. As they chant and offer prayers to the goddess, a cat moves silently through the room, its eyes glowing in the low light. The priests and priestesses pay no attention to the cat. It's just another part of the divine ambience, a living reminder of Bastet's protective presence. It's almost as though the temple itself is alive, breathing in rhythm with the silent movements of the cats. You can feel the weight of history in that moment, knowing that the cats in their quiet, mysterious way were an essential part of the sacred balance maintained within the temple walls. But the connection between cats and the temples wasn't just about protection. Cats also played a role in the religious practices of the Egyptians. The temple cats were often treated with the utmost care and respect. They were fed, groomed, and adorned with jewelry, making them not just symbols of power, but symbols of divine favor. In some cases, cats were even mummified and buried in the temples alongside their priests and priestesses, ensuring that their protective power would continue in the afterlife. This was no mere superstition. It was a deeply ingrained belief in the sacredness of the cat and its ability to transcend the boundaries of life and death. As the Nile flows gently by, carrying the whispers of ancient times, you find yourself contemplating a more somber aspect of ancient Egyptian culture, the connection between cats and the afterlife. While the cats roamed freely in temples, homes, and palaces, there was one place where their importance became even more profound: death. The Egyptians, ever mindful of their spiritual connection to the divine, believed that the journey into the afterlife was fraught with dangers, and only the purest, most sacred beings could accompany them. It's no surprise that cats, with their divine connection to Bastet, found their place alongside the dead. Imagine yourself in the cool, still air of an ancient Egyptian tomb, the silence broken only by the occasional whisper of the wind through the cracks in the stone. You walk deeper into the sacred space, your eyes drawn to a well-preserved mural on the wall. There, among the gods and spirits, is a cat, curled up, poised and serene. This image isn't just for decoration, it's a symbol, a representation of the role that cats played in the afterlife. The Egyptians believed that these cats would accompany the deceased, ensuring safe passage through the perilous realms of the underworld. In Egyptian funerary practices, cats were often buried with the dead, especially with those of noble or royal status. They were placed in the tombs not just as companions, but as protectors, guiding the soul of the deceased through the dangerous journey to the afterlife. Imagine the comfort the family of a deceased pharaoh might have felt, knowing that their loved one would have a cat by their side to ward off evil spirits and ensure a smooth transition to the next life. Cats weren't just earthly creatures, they were believed to have the power to traverse the boundaries between life and death, making them the ideal companions for the soul on its final journey. But the connection between cats and the afterlife wasn't just about physical burial. The role of cats in Egyptian religious beliefs extended beyond the tombs and into the very fabric of the afterlife itself. The Egyptians believed that the soul of the deceased would face trials and obstacles on its way to the afterlife, and only the most powerful protectors could ensure a safe journey. Cats, with their mysterious and supernatural qualities, were seen as ideal guides through these trials. As you stand there in the tomb, surrounded by the sacred presence of the cat, you realize that this wasn't just a pet being honored. It was a spiritual being with the power to influence the soul's fate. Historians still debate whether the mummification of cats was purely symbolic, or whether the Egyptians truly believed in the cat's power to protect the dead in the afterlife. Some scholars suggest that cats were seen as divine messengers, intermediaries between the world of the living and the world of the dead. Others argue that the mummification of cats was simply a reflection of the Egyptians' deep respect for these creatures, a way of ensuring that they would continue to serve their sacred role even after death. Whatever the exact belief, one thing is clear: cats in ancient Egypt were more than just animals. They were sacred beings with a powerful connection to the divine. Their presence in tombs and funerary practices speaks to their importance in Egyptian culture, not just as protectors of the home or temples, but as spiritual guardians who helped guide the dead on their journey to the afterlife. As you linger in the solemn stillness of the tombs, surrounded by the silence of the past, your thoughts drift to the deeper meanings of Egyptian mythology. Cats, it seems, weren't just symbols of protection and grace. They were woven deeply into the very fabric of Egyptian mythology. The stories surrounding them were as intricate as the hieroglyphs adorning the walls of the temples, and their influence extended far beyond the practical aspects of life and death. You see, cats had a special place in the hearts of the Egyptians because they were more than just revered animals. They were embodiments of larger cosmic forces. One of the most important aspects of this cosmic connection was the way in which cats were seen as representations of the goddess Bastet herself. As we've already seen, Bastet was the goddess of protection, love, fertility, and music, but she was also associated with the more elusive forces of the universe: chaos and order, life and death, the balance between good and evil. The lioness-headed Bastet symbolized the fierce side of these dualities, while the domestic cat embodied the more nurturing and protective qualities. To the Egyptians, this was no coincidence. Cats were believed to be the living embodiments of this divine balance, walking between the worlds of the living and the spiritual, just as Bastet did. In the hustle and bustle of ancient Egyptian life, a cat walking by wasn't just a simple pet. It was a living reminder of the cosmic balance. Picture yourself in a grand Egyptian palace, surrounded by marble columns and golden statues. When a cat saunters by, its fur glistening in the sunlight, it moves with purpose, as if it knows its place in the grand scheme of the universe. You might be surprised to learn that many Egyptians believed that a cat's movements were a reflection of the divine order. The way it moved, silent, graceful, and always with an air of mystery, was seen as a reflection of the goddess herself. It was said that the presence of a cat could restore balance, calm chaos, and even heal a troubled mind. But cats in Egyptian mythology weren't just about nurturing balance. They also had a much darker, more mysterious side. While Bastet was seen as a protector, she also had a fierce, almost vengeful aspect when provoked. This side of Bastet, much like the cats themselves, could be both nurturing and dangerous. In fact, some myths tell of Bastet's wrath when her divine nature was disrespected or when the forces of chaos were left unchecked. Cats, as manifestations of this vengeful side, were seen as guardians of sacred spaces, ready to defend the divine order at all costs. This dual nature, calm and nurturing one moment, fierce and protective the next, was the very essence of both the goddess and the creatures that embodied her spirit. Historians still debate whether the Egyptians saw their cats as physical representations of divine power, or if they were simply symbolic reminders of the forces at play in the universe. What is certain, however, is that cats were revered as divine beings, carrying with them not just the power of Bastet, but the complex and ever-present forces of balance, chaos and protection that governed the Egyptian worldview. So, as you stand in the midst of the ancient Egyptian world, you begin to understand that these cats were not mere animals. They were divine creatures playing an integral role in the very balance of the universe, and their legacy, as protectors and symbols of cosmic order, would continue to influence cultures for millennia. As you continue your journey through the rich tapestry of ancient Egypt, you start to realize that cats' influence didn't stop at the home, the temple, or even the afterlife. They also made their way into the very fabric of Egyptian warfare. Now, you might be thinking, warfare? How on earth could a cat fit into that? Well, believe it or not, ancient Egyptians recognized the importance of cats, even in matters of defense and military strategy. You see, the Egyptians were no strangers to the art of war, and like every civilization, they had their ways of ensuring success in battle. While chariots, archers, and swordsmen are often the first things that come to mind, it turns out that cats were part of the equation too. Imagine a sprawling Egyptian military camp, tents dotted across the desert, the murmur of soldiers preparing for battle filling the air. Amidst all the hustle and bustle, you notice something unusual: cats moving silently through the camp. At first it seems insignificant, but upon closer inspection, you realize that these cats weren't simply strolling around for the fun of it. They were playing a critical role in protecting the soldiers and the supply lines, much like they did in Egyptian homes. You see, cats were brought into military camps for a very specific reason: to protect the food supplies. Military campaigns were long and grueling affairs, and sustaining an army required keeping food stores safe from vermin. Rats, mice, and other pests were a constant threat to supplies, and a single infestation could cause significant damage to an army's morale and resources. Cats, with their natural hunting abilities, were the perfect solution. They moved silently through the camps, ensuring that the soldiers' provisions remained safe and intact. This role of cats as protectors of food was far more than just a practical necessity. It also had spiritual undertones. The Egyptians believed that Bastet, the goddess of protection and home, was watching over the soldiers through these feline guardians. Cats in military camps became a symbol of divine favor, a reminder that the soldiers were not just fighting for themselves, but with the protection of the gods themselves. Can you imagine the feeling of calm that would wash over the troops, knowing that, amidst the chaos of war, the divine balance was maintained by these quiet sentinels? Cats, in their serene yet watchful way, were seen as intermediaries between the gods and the soldiers, ensuring that the balance of life was preserved even on the battlefield. But the influence of cats on Egyptian warfare wasn't confined to food protection. Cats also had an impact on military strategy in a more subtle way. Their keen senses and natural instincts were seen as attributes that could be emulated by soldiers. Cats are incredibly aware of their surroundings, quick to react and capable of remaining calm under pressure, qualities that were essential for soldiers who had to remain focused in the heat of battle. Some soldiers may have even looked to the behavior of cats for guidance on how to handle themselves in combat. The calm demeanor of a cat in the face of chaos became a model for the kind of mental discipline that soldiers were expected to maintain. Historians still argue about how significant a role cats played in Egyptian military operations. Some suggest that the cat's role was purely symbolic, serving as a good luck charm or a spiritual safeguard. Others argue that cats were a practical, everyday part of military life, silently working behind the scenes to ensure that the army could function without the constant threat of pest infestations. Regardless of their exact role, it's clear that the Egyptians saw cats as much more than simple pets. They were protectors, warriors in their own right, and integral parts of the Egyptian military system. So, the next time you picture an ancient Egyptian soldier standing strong with his sword in hand, think about the silent companion at his side, the cat keeping watch over the food supply, and offering a quiet reminder that the divine in all its forms was always present. As the warm desert winds blow through the ruins of ancient Egyptian civilization, you start to realize that cats weren't just guardians in the literal sense. They were also part of something far more intricate, the medical practices of the Egyptians. You may be surprised to learn that cats, despite their reputation for being aloof and independent, played a surprisingly significant role in the ancient Egyptians' approach to medicine. While we typically associate the Egyptians with the great advances they made in medicine, like their expertise in surgery and the use of herbal remedies, cats also found a way into these practices, providing not only protection but even a form of healing. Imagine yourself in the heart of an ancient Egyptian medical center, a quiet place of study and healing. The air is thick with the scent of herbs and oils, and the soft rustle of papyrus scrolls fills the background as scribes write down treatments and remedies. But as you observe this healing space, your eyes are drawn to a cat, its sleek body curled up on a soft mat by the door. This cat isn't simply lounging, it's serving an important role, silently observing the patients and doctors alike. In ancient Egypt, cats were believed to have healing powers. While it may sound strange to us today, the Egyptians saw cats as creatures deeply connected to both the divine and the natural world, making them important in the context of medicine. Cats were often kept in temples and medical centers, and their presence was thought to promote healing. It wasn't just their soothing purrs or their calm demeanor that were believed to have healing properties. There was also a belief that cats could absorb negative energy and illness from those around them. Their calm, serene nature made them ideal companions for those suffering from physical or emotional ailments. Historians still debate whether this belief in the healing power of cats was a form of folk medicine, or whether it had a more profound spiritual significance. Some scholars suggest that the Egyptians believed the cat's ability to remain calm under pressure was a reflection of its connection to the divine, and that this ability to exude peace was thought to be transferable to those around them. Others argue that the belief in the healing power of cats was simply a symbolic gesture, a way of incorporating the spiritual world into the physical realm of medicine. In addition to their spiritual significance, cats were also associated with certain medical practices, particularly in relation to stress and anxiety. The Egyptians understood that mental health was just as important as physical health, and the calming presence of a cat was believed to help relieve anxiety and restore balance to the body and mind. Cats were even sometimes brought to patients to help calm their nerves before a surgical procedure or to alleviate the symptoms of illness. Imagine the soothing effect of a cat's gentle purring as you prepare for a difficult treatment. It would have provided both comfort and a sense of divine reassurance, something we still value today in the comfort of a pet. But the role of cats in Egyptian medicine didn't end with their calming influence. Cats were also believed to possess certain medicinal properties, particularly in the realm of pest control. Rats, mice, and other pests were common carriers of disease, and the Egyptians relied heavily on their cats to keep these vermin in check. A cat's role in maintaining cleanliness and hygiene was integral to public health, ensuring that the spread of disease was minimized. In this sense, the cat was not just a passive observer, it was an active participant in the fight against disease. Historians and modern medical professionals still argue over the extent to which ancient Egyptian medicine relied on cats in the same way we use animals for therapeutic purposes today. Some claim that the Egyptians were simply using superstition to explain the healing powers of cats, while others believe that the Egyptians had a deeper understanding of the animal's ability to influence the physical and emotional state of people. Regardless of the specifics, it's clear that cats held a significant place in Egyptian medicine, their presence deeply intertwined with both physical and spiritual healing. As you continue your journey through the ancient world of Egypt, your thoughts return to the ordinary Egyptians, those who lived in the shadows of the pharaohs and temples, their lives shaped by the rhythm of the Nile. While we often focus on the royalty and the grandeur of Egyptian culture, it's important to remember that cats were just as crucial in the everyday lives of regular Egyptians. These creatures weren't just companions for the elite, they were cherished and respected by the common folk, playing a pivotal role in their homes and daily routines. Imagine yourself walking through a modest Egyptian home, simple yet elegant in its own way. The walls are adorned with vibrant murals depicting daily life, the floors covered with reed mats, and the air filled with the sounds of children playing. And there, in the corner of the room, is a cat, its sleek form stretched out in the sunlight, its eyes half closed in a state of serene relaxation. But this cat wasn't just a symbol of divine protection or a pet. It had an important job: to protect the food supply and keep the home safe from the pests that could destroy it. In ancient Egypt, cats were highly regarded as natural pest controllers, Just as they protected the temples and palaces from vermin, they also kept Egyptian homes free from rats, mice, and other pests that could ruin food stores. Grain, the cornerstone of the Egyptian diet, was particularly vulnerable to rodent infestations, and the presence of a cat in the home was a simple yet effective way to protect the family's livelihood. Imagine the relief of an Egyptian farmer who, after a long day of working in the fields, returns to his home only to find the cat curled up in front of the grain store, watching over it with an unwavering gaze. The presence of this cat was not just comforting, it was practical, ensuring that the household's food was secure and free from harm. Historians still argue over how widespread the role of cats was in the homes of common Egyptians. Some suggest that cats were more often found in wealthier homes, where they were seen as luxury items and symbols of divine favor. Others believe that cats were common throughout Egyptian society, valued by people of all classes for their ability to protect both the home and the food supply. What we do know is that the Egyptians, whether rich or poor, understood the value of these creatures. Cats were seen as essential companions in daily life, and their role in maintaining household harmony was just as important as their divine symbolism. As you reflect on this, you begin to understand that the relationship between cats and the common Egyptians was far from one-sided. These cats weren't just protectors, they were family members, playing a role in the spiritual and physical health of the household. In many ways, they were the silent guardians of daily life, ensuring that things ran smoothly and that the family was safe from the forces of nature, whether it be pestilence or famine. In a world where the line between the mundane and the divine was often blurred, cats were seen as the perfect creatures to bridge that gap. They were both of the world and beyond it, embodying the grace and power of Bastet, while also fulfilling the practical roles of protectors and guardians. Whether it was keeping the grain safe or providing spiritual comfort, cats were indispensable in every aspect of Egyptian life. Historians continue to debate how deeply these beliefs were ingrained in the everyday life of Egyptians. Some argue that the veneration of cats was largely confined to the elite, while others believe that the common people shared just as much reverence for their feline companions. Regardless of the specifics, one thing is clear: cats were cherished by all Egyptians, not just as divine symbols, but as essential parts of the fabric of daily life. As you move further into the depths of Egyptian society, there's one thing that stands out more and more. Cats weren't just revered in the temples, palaces, and homes. Their influence stretched beyond Egypt's borders. The profound impact of Egyptian culture on neighboring civilizations, particularly when it came to their divine feline companions, can't be overstated. As Egypt's influence spread through trade, warfare, and diplomacy, so too did the veneration of cats. The question that emerges then is this: how did the cats of Egypt find their way into the hearts and minds of the Greeks, Romans, and beyond? Imagine yourself standing at the bustling trade markets on the outskirts of an ancient Egyptian port, where goods from all corners of the ancient world converge. The rich smell of spices mingles with the sounds of foreign languages. In one corner of the market, a group of Greek merchants are haggling over precious Egyptian linen, while a Roman trader is bargaining for a beautiful piece of Egyptian artwork. But amid this whirlwind of commerce, there's something else. Cats quietly moving through the crowd, their graceful forms catching the eye of many of the traders. Cats were being sold as pets, protectors, and spiritual symbols, and soon their reputation would spread far beyond Egypt. The Greeks, in particular, were captivated by Egypt's feline culture. The influence of Egypt on Greek society can't be overstated, especially when it came to religion and spirituality. The goddess Bastet, with her lioness head and protective powers, was adopted into Greek religion, where she became known as Artemis, the goddess of the hunt and protector of women and children. As the Greeks came into contact with Egyptian culture, they began to recognize the value of cats, both as symbols of divine protection and as guardians of homes and food stores. It wasn't long before cats became prized possessions in Greek homes, where they were kept as both companions and protectors, just as they had been in Egypt. The Romans, ever keen to adopt the best practices of the civilizations they conquered, also began to see the value of Egyptian cats. Roman homes, much like those of the Egyptians, began to see the rise of cats as pets and protectors. It wasn't just the aristocracy that kept cats. Households of all social classes began to understand the practical benefits of having a cat. They were natural pest controllers, and in a world without modern pest control methods, This was invaluable. Cats kept the food supplies safe from rats, mice, and other vermin, allowing Roman families to maintain their wealth and well-being. In fact, it's said that the presence of a cat in a Roman home was considered a sign of prosperity, as it meant that the household had the means to protect its resources from pests. Historians are still debating the extent of Egypt's influence on other ancient cultures, but there's no doubt that cats played a significant role in the spread of Egyptian religious and cultural practices. Some scholars argue that the adoption of cats into Greek and Roman life was a form of cultural appropriation, where the admiration for Egyptian spirituality and ritual led to the incorporation of these practices into foreign societies. Others suggest that the Greeks and Romans genuinely believed in the power of the Egyptian cats, seeing them as embodiments of divine protection and guardians of their homes. Regardless of the interpretation, it's clear that Egyptian cats had a profound impact on the wider Mediterranean world. Their influence extended beyond Egypt, leaving a lasting legacy that would continue to shape cultures for centuries to come. As you walk through the vibrant streets of these ancient civilizations, you can almost feel the presence of Egypt's sacred cats, their silent yet powerful gaze, a reminder of the deep connection between the divine and the everyday. As you step further into the complexities of ancient Egyptian society, it becomes clear that the journey of Egypt's sacred cats didn't stop with the Greeks and Romans. Their influence didn't just spread across the Mediterranean world, it reached the far corners of the ancient world, leaving traces of their divine and symbolic power. But how exactly did Egyptian cats continue to affect the civilizations they encountered? And why did their reverence persist long after Egypt's glory had begun to fade? Picture yourself in the great port cities of Carthage, where traders from the ancient world converge, bringing with them goods, ideas, and animals from all corners of the earth. The air is thick with the scent of salt water and fresh fish, while the sounds of merchants shouting their wares mingle with the calls of seagulls overhead. And there, amidst this thriving trade hub, you see them, cats. Cats, like silent sentinels, have now become fixtures of Mediterranean culture. As Egypt's influence faded in the face of conquest, it was through the strategic ports of North Africa that Egyptian cats continued to travel, carried by sailors, traders, and warriors alike. These cats, once divine protectors of Egyptian homes, now spread their protective gaze across the seas. As you wander through the bustling streets of Carthage, it's easy to see how Egypt's spiritual legacy, particularly the reverence of cats, began to blend into the traditions of other cultures. The Carthaginians, descendants of the Phoenicians, were adept at absorbing the best practices from the civilizations around them, and it wasn't long before they adopted cats as part of their own daily life. Recognizing the dual nature of these creatures as protectors of food and wealth, as well as symbols of divine favor, by now you're beginning to understand that Egypt's influence over the cat wasn't merely a passing trend. It was part of something larger, a deep-rooted respect for the cat's connection to the divine. The people of Carthage saw these creatures not only as practical pets, guarding their homes and granaries from pests, but also as divine beings imbued with the power of the gods. The presence of a cat in a Carthaginian household was more than just a sign of prosperity. It was a sign that the family had access to spiritual protection, a constant reminder that the divine order of the cosmos was preserved. Historians still debate the extent to which cats influenced cultures beyond Egypt. While some argue that their role was symbolic, rooted in the adoption of Egyptian practices, others suggest that these cats became much more than symbols. They became active participants in the societies they entered, continuing to serve as guardians, protectors, and spiritual messengers. Whether in Carthage, Rome, or Greece, the cat's role as protector of the home and food supply remained unchanged. However, it's clear that in many ways, these cats transcended their earthly duties, becoming living reminders of the divine protection that Egypt had once believed was bestowed upon them. But what about the cats of Egypt's ancient past? What happened to them as the great civilization began to fall, eclipsed by other rising empires? You might imagine the cats, those regal and mysterious creatures, silently slipping through the cracks of Egypt's fading glory, continuing their silent watch over the homes and temples they had once protected. Though Egypt's political power had waned, the cat's presence persisted across the Mediterranean, a quiet reminder of Egypt's lasting spiritual influence. Today, we still see traces of this ancient reverence. Cats, once the sacred guardians of Egypt, have woven themselves into the fabric of global culture, from ancient trade ports to modern-day homes. These creatures have continued their journey, not just as pets, but as symbols of grace, mystery, and divine protection. They've crossed borders, outlived kingdoms, and maintained their place as the enigmatic companions that live quietly among us. Their sacred legacy is still felt in the soft, comforting purrs of the cats we know today. Historians still debate whether the spread of Egyptian reverence for cats was part of an early form of cultural diffusion, or whether it was simply a natural consequence of the power of Egyptian influence. But the one thing that remains undeniable is the fact that Egyptian cats, whether in the streets of Carthage or the homes of Roman citizens, continued to serve as powerful symbols, not just of Egypt's legacy, but of something much older and more mysterious, the timeless connection between the divine and the earthly. As you make your way through the ruins of ancient civilizations with the sun setting on the vast desert horizon, you realize that the legacy of Egypt's sacred cats extends far beyond the ancient world. Even as Egypt's power faded, its influence lived on in the culture, art and beliefs of the civilizations that followed. The reverence for cats, once an intrinsic part of Egyptian life, continued to evolve and take on new forms, shaping the way these creatures were viewed across different cultures for centuries to come. Imagine yourself in medieval Europe, a world far removed from the grandeur of ancient Egypt. The sound of hooves on cobblestones and the distant clanging of swords fill the air. Yet, despite the chaos of the Middle Ages, something familiar catches your eye. A cat. While not as highly revered as in ancient Egypt, the cat still played an important role in European society, particularly in monasteries and households. Cats, like their Egyptian ancestors, were considered protectors guarding homes from rats and mice, while also providing comfort and companionship to those who lived in the harsh conditions of medieval Europe. The role of cats in medieval Europe wasn't as deeply spiritual as it was in Egypt, but there was still an element of reverence. Many monasteries kept cats to protect their grain stores and preserve the delicate balance of their food supplies. The clergy, who were steeped in religious traditions, likely saw the cats as symbolic of divine guardianship. While the Egyptians had believed that their cats embodied the power of the goddess Bastet, medieval Europeans may have viewed their cats as protectors sent by God to help maintain order in their humble lives. In addition to their practical role, cats were also linked to folklore and superstition in medieval Europe. As you walk through the streets of a medieval village, you can almost hear the whispers about the black cat that crosses your path, sometimes seen as a harbinger of good fortune, and other times a sign of impending doom. The Egyptians had seen cats as spiritual beings with a strong connection to the divine, and while this connection had evolved in Europe, the mystique of the cat had not been lost. Cats, with their mysterious nature and ability to move in and out of the shadows, were often associated with witchcraft and the supernatural. Some even believed that witches could transform into cats, adding to the air of mystery and danger that surrounded them. This European perspective on cats is a far cry from the divine guardians of ancient Egypt. Yet you can still see echoes of their spiritual significance in the way medieval Europeans viewed them. Even in a time when religion was dominated by Christianity, cats still held a certain amount of respect. It wasn't uncommon for people to keep cats for their ability to protect food supplies or for their companionship. But the idea that these creatures might possess some sort of mystical power, similar to the Egyptians' reverence for their divine guardians, lingered in the collective consciousness. Historians are still fascinated by the way in which cats managed to hold such a powerful place in cultures across time and space. While the exact nature of their spiritual significance may have changed, one thing remained constant. Cats were revered for their grace, intelligence, and mysterious qualities. From the streets of ancient Egypt to the monasteries of medieval Europe, cats have maintained their position as both protectors and symbols of something greater, whether it be the divine, the supernatural, or simply the mysteries of the universe. Now, as you reflect on the long journey of Egypt's sacred cats, you begin to see how their influence shaped not just the ancient world, but the cultures that followed. Their journey across borders and centuries tells a story of their resilience and the timeless connection between humans and these enigmatic creatures. Today, as you walk through modern cities and quiet countryside, you still find these majestic creatures watching over homes and hearts, their legacy a testament to their sacred past. As you stand in the modern world, observing the way cats have become an integral part of homes, businesses, and cultures across the globe, it's impossible not to acknowledge the deep roots they have in history. From the temples of ancient Egypt to the cold stone walls of medieval monasteries, cats have carved out a place in the human experience that goes far beyond simple companionship. Today, these ancient creatures continue to weave their way into the fabric of modern society, albeit in a form that's perhaps a little more relaxed than the regal guardians of old. But what of their legacy? What does the continued adoration of cats in the present say about our relationship with these creatures? And what connection do they still hold to their ancient sacred beginnings? You walk through a bustling modern city, the streets alive with the sounds of traffic and voices, and yet it's the cats that seem to always remain silent and watchful. Cats roam through alleys, climb up window ledges, and curl up on soft cushions in quiet homes. To the modern eye, they may seem like nothing more than pets, furry companions who demand little and give so much in return. Yet, as you pass by these creatures, their silent gaze reminds you that they are far more than just animals. They are living pieces of history. The legacy of Egypt's sacred cats still lingers in their watchful eyes, in the way they move with purpose and grace, in the way they silently guard their space, as if they are keeping watch over a world much larger than the one they inhabit. In the 21st century, cats are perhaps the most adored pets on the planet. They are symbols of independence and mystery, often depicted in films, literature and art, as enigmatic figures with one foot in the physical world and the other in the spiritual. While we may no longer consider them divine protectors or guardians of sacred relics, there remains an aura of mystery surrounding them, a mystery that likely traces its roots back to the reverence the Egyptians once held for them. Cats are still widely regarded as symbols of protection, whether they're warding off rats in a house or providing emotional comfort to their owners. The bond between humans and cats remains as strong as ever, though it's no longer wrapped in the religious and spiritual significance that defined their early history. Interestingly, even though cats are often seen as aloof or independent, there's a deep emotional connection between cats and humans. In fact, it's been scientifically proven that simply petting a cat can release oxytocin in the human brain, promoting feelings of calm and happiness. This biological reaction is a reminder of the comforting power that cats have. Much like the ancient Egyptians believed, they were thought to bring peace to the home, and in our modern world, the mere presence of a cat still brings a sense of tranquility and warmth to those lucky enough to share their lives with one. In a way, this calming influence echoes the beliefs of the past, where the cat's presence was not just comforting but also divine. But even as cats are still cherished for their companionship, their roles have shifted. In the modern world where technology reigns and the sacredness of daily life has evolved, cats no longer serve as the protectors of grain or guardians of temples. Instead, they are protectors of our hearts and homes in a more subtle, yet equally profound way. They are symbols of comfort and stability in an ever-changing world, offering solace in times of stress or uncertainty. And much like the sacred cats of ancient Egypt, modern cats still stand as silent sentinels in our homes, keeping watch over us, reminding us of the divine protection once offered by the gods. Historians and cultural observers continue to explore why cats, unlike most other animals, have become such a deeply ingrained part of human culture across time. Some speculate that it's their mysterious, often solitary nature that draws us in. Others point to their grace and intelligence, qualities that have made them not just effective hunters, but also powerful symbols of strength, balance, and mystery. Whatever the reason, it's clear that the legacy of Egypt's sacred cats continues to resonate with us today. Their history is a tapestry of divine reverence, practical use, and emotional connection that spans millennia. As you reflect on this, you begin to realize that the journey of Egypt's sacred cats wasn't just a story about an ancient civilization. It's a story that continues to unfold in every purr, every stretch, and every curious glance. Cats are still playing the same roles they once did: guardians, protectors, and reminders of the divine forces that watched over Egypt, the same forces that continue to guide us today. As you stand on the threshold of modern life, it becomes evident that the relationship between humans and cats is not only enduring, but continues to evolve, weaving the past into the present in fascinating ways. But what about the legacy of Egypt's sacred cats in the world today? How does the reverence and respect that these cats once commanded in the temples of pharaohs and the homes of Egyptians manifest in our modern world? We've seen them as protectors, guardians and companions throughout history, but today they've taken on roles that both reflect and adapt to the changing nature of society. Picture yourself in the heart of a modern city. The streetlights cast long shadows, and the hustle and bustle of everyday life continues around you. Yet, as you make your way down a quiet alley or enter a cozy home, you're likely to come across a cat, elegant, serene, and always watching. No longer the divine protectors of Egyptian temples, these cats are now more often companions, offering comfort, companionship, and even emotional support. In many ways, they still fulfill the same role they did in ancient Egypt, but in a more personal, intimate way. These creatures, once revered for their divine connection, now serve as reminders of the importance of balance in our own lives, offering a moment of calm in the chaos of the world around us. Cats have long been a source of comfort for humans, and their presence in our lives today serves as a soothing balm to the stresses and pressures we face. The Egyptians believed that cats had the ability to bring peace and protection, and we still see echoes of that belief in the way we turn to our feline companions for solace. Cats purr not just for warmth or comfort, but in a way that seems to echo the calmness that was once associated with Bastet's divine protection. And it's not just the comfort of their purring, it's the mystery and grace with which they move through our homes. Cats still embody that same sense of balance and poise that the ancient Egyptians saw as the embodiment of divine order. In fact, modern cats are so intertwined with human life that they've taken on the role of emotional support animals for many people, especially those dealing with stress, anxiety, or trauma. Whether as a source of comfort for people with mental health challenges, or simply as a beloved pet, the cat's role has evolved from being a protector of grain and temples to being a source of emotional well-being. The soothing nature of their presence, much like their ancient counterparts' spiritual significance, still holds an important place in our world today. The ancient Egyptians believed that cats brought divine protection to the home, and while that belief has shifted, the effect remains. Cats continue to guard us, not against vermin, but against the emotional strains of modern life. And then there's the question of how cats continue to influence popular culture. While in Egypt, cats were revered as spiritual entities, today they are cultural icons. From internet memes to famous figures in art and literature, cats have continued to capture the imagination of people around the world. The global phenomenon of cat videos and memes is proof of their ongoing charm, transcending cultural boundaries. It's as if, in their quiet, mysterious way, cats have remained in the collective consciousness, reminding us of a time when they were not just beloved pets, but symbols of cosmic order and divine protection. While the reverence for cats may not be as overt or as formal as it was in ancient Egypt, there is a deep, underlying respect for these creatures. In every corner of the world, people still see something sacred in cats, whether they are curled up on a windowsill, stretching in the sunlight, or simply watching with their keen eyes. Cats still carry with them the legacy of their ancient past. Their power, their mystery, and their grace have not diminished. They've only adapted to the needs and understanding of the world around them. And so, as you sit in the quiet of your own space, perhaps with a cat curled up nearby, you begin to understand the true depth of the bond that humans have shared with these creatures for thousands of years. The connection between us and the cats of ancient Egypt is still alive today, woven into the very fabric of our culture, our homes and our hearts. The legacy of Egypt's sacred cats continues, timeless and enduring, a silent reminder of the divine watchfulness that once guarded the pharaohs and now guards us. As you sit in the stillness of the present moment, the weight of Egypt's ancient past begins to feel incredibly close, like an echo that reaches us through time. The reverence for cats, which began thousands of years ago in the shadow of the pyramids, continues to ripple through history, leaving its mark on modern society. The divine protection once offered by Bastet, the spiritual guardianship of the cat, is now expressed in quieter, more subtle ways. Cats no longer stand guard over sacred temples or protect grain stores in ancient Egypt. Yet, their legacy as symbols of grace, mystery and divine protection remains deeply ingrained in our collective consciousness. You may now find yourself thinking about the cats that share your world, whether they curl up at your feet, sit serenely on your windowsill, or stealthily roam the streets of your neighborhood. They are the living echoes of a time when they were seen not just as pets, but as divine protectors, creatures with a direct connection to the gods themselves. The legacy of Egypt's sacred cats has not vanished. It simply transformed, evolving as it crossed the boundaries of time and culture. Today, cats continue to be symbols of serenity, mystery, and strength. They remind us that, even in the modern world, we are still deeply connected to something ancient and powerful. As you reflect on the journey of these sacred creatures through the temples of Egypt, the homes of pharaohs, the battlefields, and the quiet streets of Mediterranean cities, you realize that their role in human life has always been multifaceted. Cats have been guardians of the home, protectors of food, symbols of divine favor, and companions in both life and death. And though their role may have shifted, their legacy remains unbroken. Today, we see them as companions, friends, and confidants, but like their ancient ancestors, they still possess a quiet, unspoken power, a power to bring calm, comfort, and even a sense of divine watchfulness into our lives. In this final chapter of the journey, we come full circle, recognizing the enduring significance of Egypt's sacred cats in the modern world. The cats of today may not wear jewelry or walk among pharaohs, but they still share the same quiet, powerful presence that made them so revered in the ancient world. The mystical, spiritual aura that surrounded them in ancient Egypt is still alive in our homes, where they continue to offer us the same comfort and protection they once provided the gods and pharaohs. So, as you sit in your space, perhaps with a cat quietly by your side, remember that these creatures are not just pets, they are part of something much larger, carrying with them the weight of ancient history, the power of divine protection, and the timeless bond between humans and the sacred. The legacy of Egypt's sacred cats continues to thrive, not as a distant memory, but as a living, breathing part of the world around us. Now take a deep breath, let go of the day's worries, and just for a moment, allow yourself to relax into the quiet presence of your feline companion, for in that silence, you may find that the ancient connection between humans and cats, once forged in the temples of Egypt, is still very much alive in the heart of the modern world.